And I have two guests joining me via Skype to discuss the implication of this move by these countries. They are Global Affairs Analyst Femi Okutubo from London and Nweke from Belgium. Good to have you both join us this hour. Let me begin with you. Nweke. Now, what do you make of the situation where a lot of countries now around the world are easing the lockdown restrictions in their country? Is this too soon?
I think it basically depends on the situation in the country. If you assess the situation, I think it's the situation that is going to determine whether it's too soon, whether it's just about time, or whether it is something that has to wait a little bit. Now, one thing that is one thread that actually runs through the entire process from different countries of the world is that we are seeing what is called a gradual, unlocking of the economy. Now, the emphasis differ from countries to the countries. There are some countries that are actually more concerned about getting the economy up and running again. Other countries are a bit more cautious in terms of ensuring that this is done in a measured way, such that a rebound is not, meant to happen. So it really depends. But of course, the unlocking of the situation is something to be welcome. I think it's a natural evolution in terms of, after the period of, precautions. It is now time to begin to ease, the whole process. But the timing, of course, is an essential issue.
All right, Femi, let me come to you, because the idea of this is to reverse the downward trend we've seen in the global economy, but also mostly just to protect small businesses like the barbing salons and just small businesses. But again, the small businesses pose the greatest risk in terms of protective cover for their staff and customers. So what do you make of this situation?
Well, one thing we must bear in mind that a lot of what is happening is actually based on the science, and not just in terms of, maybe just, just coming up with some form of decision to ease restrictions. And yes, obviously there is no perfect situation. Every situation will have its pros and its cons. Obviously, the lockdown that we've had in most of these countries has resulted in a situation where it's had its own impact on the economy. So there's a balance between wanting to try as much as possible to stir up the economy, and at the same time, and more importantly, to save lives and do things which is actually in the public health interest. So in terms of, so I think what is probably most important here is not so much just lifting or easing of the restrictions, but it is the way that every individual actually deals with things when these restrictions are lifted. So, for example, even without any pronouncement from government, I would expect things like social distancing, things like precautions. So, for example, the use of a face mask, which is likely to be one of the things that are going to be introduced, is a step in the right direction. And people need to bear in mind as well, because again, there's a need for a lot of education in this regard. People feel that, okay, it's just a case of wearing face masks, but it actually goes a bit more beyond that. I've seen people, for example, wear the face mask the wrong way. I've seen people, for example, who are talking, they pull down the face mask, probably below their mouth or even below their nose. So people need to be educated, because the bottom line is to actually try and prevent the spread. And the whole idea, and using this face mask as an example, is that at least the face mask is there to protect you from passing on any virus if you do have it, or on the other hand, to prevent you from catching it if you're in communication with someone else. So I don't think the issue is so much the issue of the restrictions alone. It is also what we as every individual does to try and make sure that public health is paramount.
All right, Collins, let me come to you, because Femi talked about trying to strike a balance between lives and livelihood. and was seen in countries like South Korea and China, where people who had been cured or treated for the disease are retesting positive, and there's also prediction that there will be a resurgence or a second wave of this disease. So how do we strike that balance between saving lives and livelihood?
The most straightforward way of striking that balance is testing, testing, and testing. Now, countries of the world have got to step up their testing capacity. It is interesting that you mentioned South Korea, because if there is any sort of good example to learn, it is definitely South Korea, in the way that they have gone about it. And I think the cardinal point in the strategy that South Korea adopted is making sure that testing is stepped up. I will give you an example. In Nigeria, for example, the president announced, that their target is to carry out approximately 2,500 tests on daily basis. And that is for a population of about 200 million. That is grossly insufficient. Now, what we're going to have is that in situations where the restriction is eased and people begin to interact again, if there is insufficient testing, of course, the rebound is definitely going to happen, very, very quickly. Take Belgium as an example, the country where I am presently, with a population of 11 million. The initial target was for 10,000 testings to be carried out every day, but it very quickly became clear that that target was not possible. But they still managed to test 5,000 persons on a daily basis, and that for a population of 11 million. So you see, testing will be very, very crucial in ensuring that when we, unlock the, lockdown and, ease the restrictions, that those who still have it or who have had it, got cured, and, still have the potential to, infect other people, that they are removed from the society, taken into isolation and start the whole process all over again.
All right, Femi, because Collins mentioned Nigeria, let's stay in Nigeria, because the International Monetary Fund has predicted that Nigeria is headed for its worst recession in 30 years. Now, what sort of economic decisions should we be making as a country if we were to reverse that trend?
Obviously, what we have seen in the world now is the issue around the oil prices, among other things. Even in a situation where let's even assume oil was booming, as it used to be, the mere fact that there's been a shutdown of the economy to a large extent means that it's going to have its own impact on the economy itself. But now you have a situation where oil prices are actually falling, quite low. To the extent that it's even costing countries to actually, pay to have these oil lifted. It means that Nigeria's reliance on oil, which is something that, for as long as I can remember, for decades, has been something that has been talked about. Now is the time that actually needs to be put in practice. Nigeria needs to be able to look, at other areas of the sector. The manufacturing sector needs to be boosted. The agricultural sector needs to be boosted. There are things in Nigeria that, we need to sort of start exporting so that we can at least change the trade balance. A situation where Nigeria is actually having to rely on a lot of things from abroad is something that definitely must be addressed. Aside from that, I think it is also important as well that the gap between the rich and the poor needs to be bridged. So there needs to be some form of income redistribution. There's no point that people are waiting, or the rich men or the elite are waiting to, till there's actually a pandemic before they start making donations. This should be an integral core of society, and the reactions that you saw in terms of the disturbances that you had in Lagos and Ogun State, among a few other places, is a testimony that Nigeria is actually sitting on a time bomb. You know, you don't wait till things get to, to a situation where it's almost on a red alert before you start taking action. And I think what we just saw, a couple of weeks ago is again a test run for something that as a country we definitely don't want to see.
All right, Collins, there are also predictions of a global recession worse than that of the 2008 global recession. As countries begin to ease the lockdown, do you think that would mitigate the impact on the economy?
Not in a significant way. I believe that we are faced with very extraordinary times, and if you want to deal with extraordinary times, you need to put forward some extraordinary measures, and that is where a globally coordinated action is very much required at this time. And I believe that, bodies such as the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, on regional basis, the European Union, these are all bodies that have come out one way or the other, to provide facilities. Some are loans, some are, subventions to different countries to ensure that two things don't happen. Number one, massive layoff of workers as a result of the devastation that coronavirus has brought to the economy, but also to ensure that the economy itself is revived in terms of injecting impetus into the economy and making it to begin to turn again. So yes, easing of restriction is something that will help to ensure circulation in terms of economic activities, but that in itself is insufficient to get, to limit actually the devastation that the recession is bringing, because there is no doubt about the fact that the recession is there, but in its predictions as well, the IMF has told us that if there is no rebound of, the coronavirus next year, 2021, that the economic activities will pick up again. Yes, a globally coordinated action is required, and we are beginning to see signs that those actions are now being put in place. But developing economies like Nigeria take on.
All right, Collins, I'm afraid we do have to leave it there. Global Affairs Analyst Collins Nweke joining us from Belgium, and Femi Okutubo joining us from London. Many thanks to both of you for sharing your thoughts with us.